Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So this video is going to be probably a whole heap of overly produced stuff going on here, including a lot of abuse of AI art. But anyway, let's power on and get into this. So obviously, I've been inspired to finally play a Bone Shatter League starter, and I was tossing up between Incinerate or Bone Shatter, but Bone Shatter is probably going to be the go-to, pending the patch notes. And I'll stress that we haven't got patch notes. They may nerf Bone Shatter. We don't know. Anyway, so this is going to be a two-part series. Number one, we're going to talk through my level test that I did. And this was with some of the assistance of Mario's POBs in combination with benchmarking and some advice from other people that I picked up around early leveling skills that really work well. And so for this video, we're going to look at all 10 acts. We're going to go through one by one, explain and talk through as briefly as possible with as much detail that needs to be provided to not make this too confusing for everybody. As to how we get to Act 10 and then early mapping for Bone Shatter. And beyond this point, we'll talk about an early Bone Shatter POB and like an early mapping POB. That'll get you progressed to about level 90 and then beyond, and that'll be set to 5 links set up with everything on level 18 and a lot of stuff really toned down. And then we'll talk to a better tree which will get you over 1 point something mil DPS, and then that will segue us into a part 2 which will come out probably after the patch notes, which will complement this video with a number of different paths. It's probably about 3 to 4 different paths that you can take to be able to play Bone Shatter. In particular, for me, for this league, I'm going to be looking at doing Twin Nebulox and Endurance Charge stacking, which I think is just a different approach. It's a lot of fun, and there's plenty of POBs out there that you can follow, but I'll obviously be putting my own together as I balance the build myself for deep delving this league in particular, because finally I'm like, okay, maybe it's time to go deep delve. Because I've got 2 weeks off over Christmas, and why the hell not? So anyway, let's get into the video. So we're going to start this by talking through the acts and what you need to do. And obviously, if you need any other assistance or whatnot, post in the description below. The Discord has the Bone Dome, which is our dedicated Discord channel for Bone Shatter. And then basically anything else, if you want to look at the live streams from the play test from the past event that's just went through with Shifting Stones, you can do that. Or reach out to anyone in the Discord or myself in the comments, and yeah, I or anybody else will help you get your build up and going. So anyway, let's look into this build and let's do a bit of an explanation of what exactly is Bone Shatter before we start talking through the acts. All right, Bone Shatter, for anyone who hasn't played Bone Shatter or whatnot, is widely popular. Number one, because it scales really well based on its melee damage scaling. That's a given. But basically what it is as you hit, you'll develop what's called a trauma stack. And as that trauma stack develops further, you'll do more and more damage. Now, the way that this build generally tends to work is, depending on the variation that you take, you can take a whole number of different types of routes. You can go 2H axe, you can go twin nebs. In this case, this is a Dawnbreaker setup. And I have this on like a Magnate setup. Now, the version that I've got in front of you right now is a more delve-centric version. Same with Twin Nebulox is really good in delve. Double-handed axe generally tends to be better at mapping and as you progress through the native style of the game, and that's how we're going to level the build up and how I'll show you how to level it up. But basically, we stack enough attack speed, we use Enhance eventually in the end game build, and we synergize that with Ashes, and then we run Divergent Bone Shatter, and then basically do an absolutely metric ton of damage. And then on top of that, we want to stack tons and tons and tons of armor, and then basically scale that up as we pretty much develop the build out further. And then beyond that, you're then also going to want to convert all the incoming damage to fire damage taken. And then because you're stacking armor, you use a thing called Unbreakable, which is on the Jug Ascendancy, and you also use Untiring, which converts physical damage taken to life regenerated over time. And then basically you can just push down and delve, all day long, because any amount of physical damage you take converts back to fire damage, and Bob's your uncle. That's basically a really unabridged version of Bone Shatter. Now, why is this build so popular? As noted, it just scales really, really well. Trauma stacking with this scales really well. It works extremely well on the Juggernaut, which is a really safe ascendancy to play. And unlike other melee skills, like a lot of other melee skills require intricate balancing or, crazy weapons, Bone Shatter is like a SSF foolproof build. It's like the melee version of Righteous Fire. You equip it with just basic gear. It gets off the ground and just goes like a bat out of hell. It's really simple. Now, when you are leveling up with the dual axe version, you will eventually need to get a higher end DPS axe, but they're really easy to get because most of the time you end up delving with the jug and playing Bone Shatter, and then you just literally smash two-handed Val axes with jagged fossils and Bob's your uncle. You're done. That's basically all you really need to know about Bone Shatter. So some of the other synergies it gets, because you're obviously running Unstoppable, it means you can't be stunned with this build either. And what that also means is you can run things like, if I can find it in here, Nature's Patience, which means you get these little vines that attach to you that increase your damage reduction taken or damage inbound taken, and it increases the damage that you output. So the longer you stand stationary, the more damage you do. Now, you can also stay basically satiated on a death's wire with this build, where you can be just not dying but close to death, depending on how many stacks of trauma you get. And the other thing, as you develop the build, if you overscale your attack speed, you can destroy yourself because you can attack too fast, generate way too much trauma, and your regeneration does not outperform the trauma that you're taking, and then basically you'll just clip yourself, which is pretty funny when it happens. And then yeah, you just need to tune back your attack speed, which can mean you'll see sometimes builds that use lesser level Bone Shatter, like level 18 or 19 or something like that, instead of level 20, just to tune their speed down so they don't accumulate too much trauma, which means they can sort of hit that sweet spot, sustain inbound damage and the damage that the trauma stacks on you, but regenerate just enough to keep you level to not die. The other thing that this build really excels at over other builds is overcapping reses as well. And generally the way that you go about that will be using Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh, and then you'll stack Valakos Storm's Embrace, which basically means your highest capped fire res is the same overcapped res across all of your resistances, which makes it really easy to res cap to 90%. It's basically a free melting, well, it's not a free melting of the flesh, but it's a cheaper version of achieving melting of the flesh. And as you can see with my variant of the build here, I do it with the Magnate, and you can do it with other different belts and whatnot. The ideal outcome with Bone Shatter is to go for a Mage Blood, but obviously this is a leveling guide, and there's no bloody way that I'm going to put a Mage Blood in a leveling guide, because that'd be absolutely ludicrous. Anyway, fundamentally that's how it works. That's a really quick explanation of Bone Shatter. Is this a League Starter friendly build? Yes. It scales really well, and what you would have seen in the playtest if you watched the streams, or what we'll talk about, is that level of scaling progresses through the game, and it just makes it a really easy sort of campaign run. I think I did 6 to 6.5 hours on a clean run, no gear, no nothing, which makes Bone Shatter a really appealing skill for League Starter players. And it's also a very SSF friendly build, because literally the uniques that, and you don't even need to have the unique, is Tanuahi, which are amazing gloves for Bone Shatter, just for the case that you get Adrenaline and Onslaught for free off the gloves, and attack speed. And this works perfectly on Bone Shatter, and this is a really common item. It's like 3C to, I think, 5C tops on the first day of most leagues. It drops all throughout the campaign. Yeah, you got to be pretty unlucky for it not to drop for you, but, it's easy enough to get from just the few sort of pieces of change chaos that you get as it drops throughout the campaign for you. You can get this straight away, and then that just pops your build off. And then basically everything else can be self-crafted or farmed out of Delve. As you can see here, the only thing is like Ashes and Magnate, and Magnates are not that uncommon, and Dawnbreakers drop on Exarch all the time as a pretty common drop. So really the only real rare item here is Ashes, and then basically scaling up your cluster jewels and whatnot, which would take a little more effort. But yeah, ignore the tattoos in this too. This is an old version of the tree. Anyway, that's basically an explanation of what Bone Shatter is. If you didn't already know, is this going to work for you if you've never played the game before? Yeah, it will work quite easily. And whether or not you follow my guide on this, or if you follow Maxroll's guide on this, which is quite good as well, or Goratha's guides, or anybody else's, Bone Shatter is just a really consistent play style. My guides are going to go the path of of basically going into Delve. Other guides will go the path of two-handed builds, and it's up to you what you want to do. Can this do Ubers? If you gear anything up well enough and you have the skill, yes, it will eventually be able to do Ubers. It's not as good as other builds, like, you know, Ignite dot stacking builds and Detonate Dead and things like that, but you can still get it there, absolutely. Anyway, that's a quick explanation of what Bone Shatter is. Let's get into the leveling guide. Okay, so in Act 1, you're obviously going to start on Twilight Strand, and basically the first thing you're going to get is Heavy Strike. Now, you're just going to Heavy Strike your way through, take whatever, you're going to get Ruthless, but anyway, the first thing you're going to do is you are going to get Smite. And this comes from Nessa, from the quest, the Enemy at the Gate, and then basically from that, you're going to get Momentum, and that's also going to come from Nessa, from the Mercy mission, and then you're going to get Ancestral Call. And generally with Momentum, you'll need to go back to Nessa. It'll cost you 1 Wisdom Scroll, and I would recommend buying that. This is going to make you run really quick. Now, the ideal thing is to try and get an early 3-link if you can. If you can't get a 3-link on, you know, straight up, then start with a 2-link and run Ancestral Call and Smite as your first leveling item. Now, I actually didn't know that this was such a consistent skill, and we're going to use Smite pretty much all the way through until about Act 3 at this stage. And beyond this, you're going to pick up Ancestral Protector Totem. This is going to speed your attack rate up. Leap Slam is obviously going to be your mobility. If you have to go back to Nessa to repurchase this from the Cage Brute, then I'd recommend doing this. I ran Steel Skin. I mapped this to my move button, and then when I can get faster attacks, get that from Nessa again. So you're going to go back and travel back and just gear up. This early gearing is really important, or gemming up is really important to give you an efficient run. And then I also ran Intimidating Cry and Vitality, and that basically got me over the line. Now, in the middle of all this, you're going to be running Mana Flask, which are going to sustain you. So now we'll talk about the gearing. All right, so by the end of Act 1, you pretty much want to be going for a decent axe, you know, two-handed axe. As soon as you can, switch to a two-handed axe, do exactly that. Helm, you're going to want to get armor, as much armor as you can. Chest piece, try and get a larger heavy set chest piece with armor again. Amulet doesn't really matter. Rings, iron rings, ideally, and coral rings, but generally, if you want to balance your resistances out, try and get cold resist and lightning resist, so topaz and sapphire rings earlier on. These are going to be pretty pertinent when you go and kill the last boss in Act 1 as well. And then a rustic sash, that's going to give you more physical damage, but if you can get a leather belt, that's going to push your health up. Boots that give you armor. If you can get movement speed, absolutely go for this. And then obviously any gloves that you can get that are rare by the end of Act 1 that at least give you some kind of resistance or anything like that. But Act 1, you know, beggars can't be choosers at the end of the day. And my setup at the end flask-wise was a Quicksilver Flask and then 2 Life Flasks and 2 Mana Flasks to sustain my mana until I can actively sustain my mana. Okay, so Act 2. So continuing on with Smite and Ancestral Call. There's no reason to change this unless you can get a 4-link at this stage, and it's probably not going to happen. Same thing again, Ancestral Protector, and I did pick up a Flesh and Stone from Yena in Act 2 at the end of the Intruders in the Black Quest. This just gives you more AoE damage between and/or damage straight up between switching between Blood and Sand stance. Ideally, I just stay in Blood stance the whole time, even though I know you shouldn't. I do it anyway because I like to be a rebel. Then beyond that, I went back to Act 1 and got a Clarity Gem because I noticed that my mana needed a little more sustain, and at this point I had enough currency that I was able to go and buy just a straight up Clarity Gem, which means it's traveling back to Act 1 and switching this out, or adding this to the build, sorry, just make sure you got an item with a blue socket. Leap Slam and faster attacks still, Steel Skin still mapped to my move button, still Ancestral Cry, and still Vitality, no other major changes there. From the gearing perspective, I got a better pull at Amulet. I did manage to find a Topaz ring and a Sapphire ring that were worth equipping. That gave me a lot more resistance, which got me closer to early capping. I did get a leather belt that was pretty decent as well as a quest reward. Same boots, same everything else, same helm. Axe, just continually always looking for a better axe, but this axe actually took me a fair ways through. And chest piece, just continually look for better chest pieces. I did start switching out my flask by the end of Act 2 as well. Still maintaining the consistency of the flasks I had. I think I switched out one mana flask and forgot to put it back in before I pulled the POB. But that's about it. No major changes outside of that. Act 2 was pretty mundane. It was just like leveling up and whatnot with Smite, because Smite's not going to be an endgame skill. It's just pushing through the campaign at that point, or into it. So we finally get a 4-link in Act 3, and this is when we switch to Bone Shatter. So this will come from Sosha, which is the library quest that none of us do. Pretty good on League Start. If you do take the 5 minutes to do it, you'll get access to Bone Shatter by level 28, or there's a quest for Clarissa, which allows you to get it from, Clarissa moving forwards, called Sever the Right Hand. Either or, switch to Bone Shatter in Act 3, or by the time you can switch to it in Act 3, this is going to boost your damage up pretty significantly. Then we'll go back and we'll grab Ruthless from Act 1, or if you've completed Sosha again in Act 3, you can just buy Ruthless at level 1 from Sosha, but I'd recommend going back and buying it to a scaled level from Act 1 from Nessa. Same with Close Combat, so we're going to switch to Close Combat and then melee physical damage, so we go back to Yina in Act 2, or Sosha again in Act 3. And yeah, or you can pretty much, if you've got the currency, just buy all these gems from Sosha in Act 3, and Bob's your uncle, you're done. Then on my Aura setup, I'll be running Clarity, Determination, Steel Skin still on my move button, Ancestral Protector, Flesh and Stone, and Leap Slam and faster attacks, and Ancestral Cry. Now, if you can't run Clarity and run Flesh and Stone at the same time, you could either switch off Flesh and Stone or you switch off Clarity. Just depends on how your mana sustain is. Generally with Bone Shatter, you don't really have too many issues sustaining it because it is a melee skill. It doesn't cost as much mana to cast or hit with, but up to you. Just play with your build and make sure that you're sustaining it. If you need to, just run a mana pot until you can. But that's basically what I did to get this kicking in Act 3 from the gem setup perspective. With gearing, I made some significant changes in Act 3. The first of all, I've got a significantly better axe than what I previously had. My helm was drastically improved, and I've targeted trying to get accuracy rating on the helm if you can, but it's resistances and life that you need to really start targeting to be able to get ready as you progress through the campaign. Amulet, still the same amulet, still the same topaz ring and sapphire ring, but if you can find better ones, absolutely go for it. More res, the better. Get it closer to that 75% hit mark. Chest piece, better again. So we got a piece of scale armor, which gave me more armor and evasion in this particular circumstance. Belt, same as last time, and also better boots as well. That gave me a lot more armor and resistances, and more resistances on my gauntlets. In this case, I went back and I crafted off of my bench craft as well. Don't forget, as you level up, you can go back to the bench and you can put basic crafts on through the leveling in the campaign, and this is going to prop you up. And is a good use of the early resources because it's going to make the run more comfortable as you level, as opposed to you dying to stupid things like fireballs and ice bolts and stuff like that from random enemies off the screen. Outside of that, same flask, just life flasks, quicksilver flask, mana flasks, and at this point I still had, well, they're not pulling through, giant life flasks and large mana flasks. Okay, so Act 4, no real changes to the setup, just continue leveling. Bone Shatter, Ruthless, Close Combat, melee physical damage, Clarity, Determination, and Steel Skin are all the targets. With Ancestral Protector, Flesh and Stone, Leaf Slam with faster attacks, and Ancestral Cry. If you're getting frustrated with Leaf Slam costing too much on the mana front and you can't sustain that, then basically just switch to a life tap setup. And the other thing is, Clarity doesn't need to be an overtly large level. I've only got it at level 5. This is enough to sustain Bone Shatter and everything else at this stage of the game. Oh, and I should also note, no further changes to gear setups either. Pretty much the gearing is just whatever you can find. But yeah, I didn't really change my gear too much at this point. Okay, so no major changes for Act 5. I should probably note too that if you're looking to hit your first ascendancy, this would be a good time to do it. Level up a little bit over the first Act 5 cap, which I think was about level 35, and then basically tackle Izaro. Now, you can do this at the end of Act 4 as well, but I'd recommend, if you're a little bit more uncomfortable in doing your first Izaro, get to Act 5, level up a little more so you can just cheese the fight. If you're over level and you've got a lot more damage output, then it'll be a hell of a lot easier. But aside from that, no other major changes in Act 5 either at this stage. Pretty much just continue leveling on, get your Ascendancy, and move to Act 6. Rightio, so we've gotten to Act 6, and we're still running our Bone Shatter. We just continue to level it up at this stage. Same with Close Combat, Ruthless, Melee Fizz, and Ancestral Protector, Flesh and Stone, Leap Slam, and Faster Attacks with Steel Skin, Ancestral Cry, and at this point we have Call to Arms, so we've got this map to our move button, so as we run around, we're now Ancestral Crying, which does quite a lot more increased damage towards enemies that have been, well, based on the hits coming off Ancestral Cry and the Warcry stack off it. Then we have Determination and Clarity as our other two auras, but this is not where our major change is. Our major change starts to become apparent in our gearing at this point too. For the gearing, so we've just run with the same axe that we've had for a number of axes at this stage because nothing else had dropped at this stage, so there wasn't a lot of point of changing it. Helm-wise, still the same. Amulet improved on what it was previously, so we've got a lot more damage coming off our amulet as well as resistances, and this is when we're targeting things like dexterity to make sure that we're managing our attributes so we can run the skills that we want to run. My chest piece hadn't changed either at this point. My rings, the only change I'd made was a ruby ring which had all res on it. Oh, sorry, a lot more fire res, 49% fire res and 27% lightning res. But I'd also picked up Tanu Ahis, and now I got these for 3 chaos. And at this stage, I had about 5 or 6 chaos drop within the campaign. So this was completely doable and sustainable by Act 6. So anyone who's going to be like, you can't have uniques in a leveling guide, this unique is absolutely dirt cheap. And you can have a look in the PoE pricing, the PoE Ninja pricing index for it. From start through to finish, this item hit no greater than 5 to 6 chaos, which you can get as you level up generally throughout the campaign. It's not unknown. And if you can't get these gloves, don't stress. You can use pretty much any gloves that you want. But these work for me, and I managed to get them, so I had enough chaos drops so I could afford them. So yes, completely viable to do. Then beyond that, I just have my leather belt and my same boots that I'd been running for a while. And I also switched out and got a granite flask as well, and I managed to alteration roll attack speed on this, which increases your damage pretty significantly as well at this stage of the game too. We had like 8.2 thousand DPS, which is pretty good. But yeah, that's pretty much where we got to by the end of Act 6. Setup changes at this stage. We're still just leveling up the gems as they were from the previous couple acts. So at this stage, I managed to get my hands on a significantly better axe. My helm stayed the same. My amulet stayed the same. Same with my rings. They stayed the same. I had my Tanu Ahi, and I had my armor, leather belt, and my boots. Really didn't change. I had reduced mana cost from the first lab that I completed. There's still Granite Flask and Quicksilver Flask with no other flask changes. At this stage, though, I did manage to get my second Ascendancy, which was undeniable, which gives you an incredibly increased amount of attack speed based on your accuracy and allows you to stack accuracy at this point on the jug, which is really useful. This gives a huge quality of life to doing damage and dishing out the pain. And pretty much, yeah, as soon as I got into Act 7, this is what I was doing. So that's what I'd recommend for you to do as well, if you've got the right gearing and your character's balanced enough to do so at this point. Okay, so by Act 8, we pretty much just had the same setup. Bone Shatter on a 4-link was working really well. We got to level 15 on that, on pretty much all the support gems, except for Ruthless was level 16 as well. Ancestral Cry, we're just running around smacking everything with that. Determination, Clarity, and Flesh and Stone, still rocking that with Ancestral Protector and Leaf Slam and Faster Attack. So just like a mean and lean build. You could put Blood Rage into this as well if you wanted to generate Frenzy charges consistently too, so that's also an option. And you could put it on Custom Damage Taken setup, but I hadn't even done that at that point. The bigger change though is we managed to get a Labbers, which was of huge damage. I think I had it like 200 to 300 DPS, something like that, with 22% increased attack speed, which is quite significant. Now, that was really lucky to find that, and then managed to craft the right fizz damage roll onto that as well. So this is again where the bench craft comes in really useful. My helm, I pretty much had the same helm that I rolled all the way throughout the campaign at this stage because I didn't really need to change it. Same with my amulet, same with my my ruby ring and my sapphire ring. Actually, I did change my sapphire ring, and I managed to get one with 24 plus 30 cold res, so 54% cold res, which is pretty useful. I also switched out my chest piece for ornate ringmail, which had a lot more base armor on it, and also gave me a lot more fire and cold res, so I could keep capping up my reses. Same leather belt, same boot. Actually, boots changed as well. So I managed to get Goliath Greaves that gave me fire and lightning res and a little bit of life and a lot more armor and strength. And then obviously still rocking out with my Tanuahi gloves. No changes to the flask at all, except I switched out my mana flask to a sanctified mana flask, but realistically you don't really need that at this stage. The other big improvement was at this point I managed to take precise technique as well, and we'll cover that off in the skill tree, the leveling skill tree, which will be after the gearing section, gearing and skill gem section now. Rightio, so by the time I finished Act 9, I got to about 49,000 DPS with Bone Shatter at about 8 stacks, though that's assuming it's got higher stacks than what it probably has too, potentially. So running around with my my labbers that I got in my last Act playthrough, Crusader Helmet, nothing really changed on my amulet, my chest piece, or any of my other gearing. There was no need to. And again, nothing changed on my flask. Basically, this is a really good opportunity to get your character level up if need be. So if you need to get your character level up to level 61, you can go back to Blood Aqueduct and get up to level 61 or 62, which will make it a hell of a lot easier when you get into Act 10, and then you basically finalize on Kitava. And the other thing, just bearing in mind, by this point, I was rocking about 80% fire res, 78% cold res, 65% lightning res. My chaos res was still pretty bad. Negative 30%, but everything else was pretty consistent, so you know, not too bad by the end of Act 9 at this point. And no other major changes in my gem setups either. That just stayed the same, and that's why we're just looking at the gearing at this stage. Okay, so this is pretty much the last act that we're going to talk through. This is where you should be by the end of Act 10. So I got to level 66. And then beyond this, I was running Flesh and Stone, Ancestral Protector, Bone Shatter with melee fizz damage, close combat, and ruthless. And as you can see, I got to about 114,000 DPS, and that's at maximum stacks that it can reach at that current Jexture. But you know, not too bad on a 4-link setup with Ancestral Cry, Leap Slam, faster attacks, determination, and clarity. Now we don't even have Blood Rage in this yet, so we're not generating frenzy charges or anything. You could run that in this without any issues. And no cast wind damage taken, Molten Shell, which you'll pretty much want to get to when you get to maps, and we'll talk about that in the next POV that I'm going to put up, which is where this will go into early mapping progression. But gem setup wise, super easy to get to Act 10. This just breezed over at Kitava with no real issues whatsoever. But let's talk about the gear that I had as well at this point. Okay, so from the gearing setup perspective, obviously was just running around my same axe that I've been running around for the last 2 acts or 1 act with. I did switch out my helm for a Burgeonet with intelligence, armor, life, and resistances. Basically, the goal is just capping resistances. My armor was hitting 38% cold res and a heap of armor as well. My rings didn't really change, nor did my amulet, nor did my gloves, nor did my belt, and my boots are still the same. Didn't really need to do anything with that. I did have on my flasking a Corrupted Blood immunity flask. I did have my Quicksilver, and I did manage to get a good Quartz flask as well. And I got a Granite flask too. Now, the other thing is you'll also ascend. I hadn't ascended at this stage, so your next ascendancy point after Act 10 will be Unbreakable. And then the final one will be Unstoppable, and that'll stop you from being stunned and all sorts of the likes. Now, this was set to pinnacle damage, and I managed to get to 24,000 armor and 114,000 DPS, though I hadn't scaled. I think I'd scaled the stacks to 8 stacks of trauma at this stage. So it was doing pretty okay damage just out of Act 10, but obviously there's a long ways away to go until it's ready to consistently do maps, but this is a good start to get into mapping, and we'll talk about the further progress tree from this point with a 5-link setup beyond this part of the video, so just as we get into the next part, after we talk about leveling. Okay, so you guys would have noticed that I didn't include the leveling tree, and this is all feedback from everybody. So I've actually given you an act by act leveling tree, right? By the end of each act, this is about where I got to. So do this what you will. Now the gearing in here is still based on the end gearing I had by the end of the end of the campaign. So if you want the act by act gearing, I'm going to give you all 10 POBs with every single act in them as well. But anyway, let's talk through the tree and how I progress the tree from Act 1 through to Act 10. So, and this will all be in the description below as well, so you can pull this out and have a look and do with it what you will. So basically, I pulled these points. I went down to Warrior's Blood as I leveled up in my early leveling, and then I got up to Born to Fight first. Picked up accuracy, and that was pretty much the last point I got on, like, what am I at, level 16? So when I got to level 16, and then I picked up kinetic impacts and two-hand masteries, 40% increased damage against rare or unique enemies. This isn't uncommon for these types of builds too, so these leveling trees look pretty much all the same across any build you look at. Then we go to Act 2. So we picked up Versatility. We then picked up Prismatic Skin, worked our way down to Tribal Fury. This gives you melee strike splash damage, which is going to be significant when you get to Bone Shatter, and you realistically need this. So yeah, that was the end of Act 2. End of Act 3. We're getting a bit more complex here, so we picked up Reservation Efficiency, and then the auras from your skills have 10% increased effect. The main reason for this is for armor down the track. And then we got Call to Arms as well, which meant by the end of Act 3, we could then cast War Cries willy-nilly as we were running around and map that to the move button. Then by Act 4, I branched out, I got Wrecking Ball and started moving towards Dismembering. Then by Act 5, we actually went away from Dismembering. Don't know why I did that. Anyway, so we went away from that, and then we got to Hatchet Mastery. We did pick up the Mastery point for two-hand mastery, so 10% increased armor per red socket on main hand weapon, 10% increased evasion as well per green socket, and then basically we pick up attacks with axes and swords grant 1 rage on hit, which meant that we could start generating rage at this stage as well. We also picked up the non-Val skills target 1 additional nearby enemy, which you can get earlier if you are progressing, with the Act 4 tree. Well, actually in Act 4 you would want to have that too. And let's just adjust this as well, so that should say that there. So yeah, that's basically it for the end of Act 5. And then we also picked up Soul of Steel by the end of Act 5 as well. So we branched out across here and picked up Soul of Steel to get a lot more armor and overcap our resistances by 1. And get a little bit more resistance as well. So we're countering the enemies trying to off-screen us. By the end of Act 6, we started to branch out and we got Master of the Arena. This gives us, the significant thing here is 0.3 meters to melee strike range, which means Bone Shatter can hit further, which is pretty damn useful. Then we come up and we grab Inexorable, and this basically acts the same as the Jug Ascendancy for unflinching. So as you're getting hit, you've got a 25% chance to generate endurance, and because we're playing a super tanky character, you're definitely going to get hit. And if you're delving, you are absolutely, positively 125,000% going to get hit in delve. So you're going to have a 25% chance of generating that endurance charge off of that probability there. Which is basically a guarantee you're going to get one. And then we got the Armor Mastery, 1% to all maximum elemental resistances if all of our helm, body armor, gloves, and boots all have armor on them. Then beyond that, we get to Act 7, by the end of Act 7, and this is when we start to branch out back across this way here. So we're starting to move, we get Bravery, we get Art of the Gladiator, we're starting to move down so we can pick up Precise Technique. That's basically the biggest change we have here. Act 8. So Act 8, we finally have Precise Technique, and this basically means that if our accuracy rating is greater than our HP, or our life, then we get a 40% buff to attack damage, which is pretty significant. And because we get Undeniable, we've definitely got accuracy over our HP or life, so we're definitely getting that 40% buff. Then we come back up and we pick up Juggernaut for some more armor and some more life. Then by the end of Act 9, we go and grab Slaughter. This gives us more rage, and remember, we're getting rage from our point down here as well in our Axe Mastery, so this just synergizes out further and gives us more damage. And then by the end of Act 10, we've got the Axe Mastery here for 30% increased damage while in Blood Stance, which I pretty much stay in Blood Stance, so that's going to be significant. And then you're going to pick up barbarism as well. So that's basically where I got to. Ascendancy wise, you're going to be getting untiring first, you're going to get undeniable second, and you're going to get unbreakable third. And when you get to mapping and you finally do your Uber Lab, you're going to get unstoppable, and this is going to literally make you unfreaking stoppable. And this is at about level 66 at this point. So this POB will be in the description below, and yeah, go crazy and do with it what you will. And this will go in combination to the leveling guide in this video, and also the POBs that will be on the in the links below as well. Okay, so if you're an average player like myself, you get to like a 5-link setup by the end of the first day, and you sort of need a bit of an idea of where you're going to progress after you get out of the campaign. You've got your early leveling done and whatnot. So once you get out of map, once you get out of Act 10, what's the plan? What do we do? Okay, well, this is what we're going to talk through now. So this is the next tree. So this is day one progression, right? So this is going to be like where you want to get to in the first day. Ideally, like you probably get to like T10 maps, something like that, or T6 to 10 maps, however you play it. That's about where I go with it. Sometimes I push a little further depending on how much caffeine I've got in my system, but often like we all are human and can only sit at a computer for so long. So this is basically the target. We'll let the hardcore guys play, crazy, 20-hour runs or whatever. But anyway, okay. So we get to like a 352,000 effective hit pool. We get to 562,000 DPS as well. Accuracy can be better, or chance to hit can be better, so accuracy can be improved. But this is the gem setup. So let's talk about this first. And this is taken from the trees that Mario put in the POB as well. And I've retuned this to sort of scale it back down so it's a bit more approachable. So we're going to tackle this in like layers, like an onion, basically. So basically, we look at this this tree. So our gem setups, in our gloves, we're running faster attacks, leap slam, ancestral cry, and life tap. Now, ancestral cry, you're going to want to run that on your move button so that you're always popping that with your call to arms. So you always have that war cry up. Beyond that point, we're then going to run on our boots, Blood Rage, Molten Shell, and cast when damage taken. And we run level 5 Blood Rage, level 5 Molten Shell, and level 1 cast when damage taken. This is just easier like when you're leveling up. And you do this after you finish Act 10, once you've got the right sockets on your gear. And that way you can have Blood Rage up and you generate Frenzy charges from killing things. It's going to make you faster, and it's going to make you proc your trauma stacks quicker with Frenzy charges and more attack speed, but there is that degen cost that comes with Blood Rage. So that's why we're running it at a very low level, and it's easily triggered when we take damage as well. So basically, we've always got it up, which is great. Then we're going to have our 4 auras. Now, if you can't get Enlighten and you can't run Purity of Elements straight up, don't stress. You could switch out Flesh and Stone. It is going to drop your damage by a fair bit, but having Purity of Elements is probably a more consistent outcome here. And we do have Enlighten on this setup as well, assuming that we do get other mana reservation efficiency areas in the gearing setup, and we'll talk about that when we get to gearing. But yeah, we run level 18 Determination, Flesh and Stone, and Purity of Elements if we can fit it all in there. And I've retuned this so that it's more practical when you're getting to like T10. You're probably level 18, level 19, something like that. All right. So then in our helmet, we're running Ancestral Protector, War Chief Totems, Maim. If you can get Val War Chief Totems, so you want to do your Val side areas, because there's a good probability that'll drop throughout the campaign, do that. And then run Val War Chief Totems. And then multiple totems is going to let you have either 2 Ancestral Protector Totems and 1 War Chief Totem, or 2 War Chief Totems and 1 Protector Totem. Take your pick, doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But you do need the buffs that come off them, because we're going to put Panopticon on our amulet, which is relatively cheap anyway to anoint. Then on our 5-link Bone Shatter setup, right, stress, I'm doing a leveling tree on day 1 that is not a 6-link, but a 5-link, okay? So we've got level 18 on everything, no quality on everything, right? It's not alt quality gems or anything like that. So we have Bone Shatter, Ruthless, Brutality, Fortify, which a lot of defense is coming from, and Close Combat as well. So this is pretty, I'd say like this is pretty damn reasonable. Like if you're delving on day 1, like I usually do, and I'm going to do a video on what my strategy is when I get into early maps and how I alternate between delve, and I'll be using this build to do that. then basically it's not hard to hit early cities and get the currency you need to be able to get a 5 link, or you can get a 5 link on the market, any 5 link. But that will dictate differently to how this early build is going to go. And we'll talk about gearing next. But that's basically it for the gem setups. It's not crazy. It's pretty straightforward and it's relatively achievable. There's nothing insane in here. Like maybe Enlighten is going to be a little harder to get on day one or day two. But if you can't get it, you just need to compensate somewhere in the build or drop an aura. It's basically as simple as it is. Okay, gearing wise. Now the axe is pretty chunky. We get to like 316 to 476, 28% quality, but it's not an impractical axe to get on day one, to be honest with you. I almost got an axe at the same sort of physical DPS just from running out of Act 10. So that's not impossible at all. It is quite doable. So yeah, anyone is like, this axe is not possible to get. It is absolutely possible to get on day one. And you know, void of that, you could just run Jagged Fossils, or you have a like a level 79 axe drop, and then basically try and craft on that an alteration orb or whatever. But yeah, this is just like progressive farming, but plenty of these come up on the market pretty quickly. This isn't a very good axe, but you know, it's good enough for day one. Now, helm wise, we do have mana reservation efficiency on this, and this is just obtained by getting to, you know, your Ickers and your whatchamacalleds from Exarch. Basically, you're just going to smack that and hope to God you get that roll. Now, you may not be able to get 7% physical damage taken as hits as fire. That's a Syndicate roll, but, you know, just run Syndicate. The other thing, too, is this does have the Helm enchant. On day one, you may find some Helms come up with that, but if you don't get upset. You know, it's not the end of the world. Just drop your expectations just a touch. But yeah, you can generate plenty early currency in Delve. And again, I'm going to release an updated guide on how to do that, so don't stress. I'll show you how to really smash day one and day two hard. And that's not going to be an issue to get a helm like this in the first couple days of League. Now, fourth vow. This drops all through the campaign. So, or not the campaign, sorry, after level 55. It's a level 55 item. 5 linking one of these, not very hard. And if you get a 5 link axe, you could get a 4 link of this and do whatever you want. It's up to you. But yeah, this isn't a difficult ask to get this item in particular. It's just a really good item. And it means because you've got so much armor, it applies to chaos damage taken from hits, which is where a lot of the effective hit pool comes from early on with Bone Shatter. As you can see, it's 286,000 effective hit pool. So really useful item, really good for early Bone Shatter builds, and yeah, not an impractical item at all to get. Now, Tanuahi, as noted, dirt cheap, easy to get. Make sure if you get them dropping, you corrupt them to try and get the attack speed implicit roll on them. But yeah, this is definitely like a 3 to 5 C item on day one, so not expensive. Titan Greaves. So this has got a lot of really good rolls on it. You're probably not going to get all of these rolls straight up on day one, though. You just like, this is just the early stages of min and maxing, to be honest with you. Even if you don't get your resistances that high, I wouldn't stress, like, the resistances on this build are very excessive. Lower resistances are perfectly fine, and you could actually roll these with, pardon me, flat regeneration as well, and that's going to give you an advantage either way. I'd probably say if you can get the Onslaught roll with Syndicate, and you can get a similar amount of armor on here and the resistances and not the movement speed with a prefix open to put the Onslaught roll on, then do that, because it's an easy way to get Onslaught. Even though you get it from Tanuahi, it's a like double stacking Onslaught, so it makes it more consistent early on. Eternal Struggle, this drops from the Eater of Worlds, like, lesser Pinnacle boss. Can't remember what it is, don't really like farming it, but these pop up all the time on the market. Now, this is a pretty good roll with the increased attack damage and Fizz global damage, and to be honest with you, like, it's not necessarily going to be an overtly expensive item. You could farm it yourself if you do farm enough T, like 13 to 16 maps or whatever early on, but realistically it is doable to get it. But if you can't get this, literally any other amulet is going to do the trick, at least at this stage. Like, you're only going to lose a little bit of physical, like, you're going to lose some physical damage, but it's not going to make or break the build. The big thing here is the cull, which is pretty cool, and it's going to give you that early map clear that you want with this build. But if you can't get it, don't stress, anything else will do. Just have a play around with it. Now, Amethyst Rings, this one would have been a Syndicate drop as well, so you know, you can farm this from Syndicate. The other targetable location you can get these from is Chaos Nodes and Delve as well. you know, not necessarily an impossible ring to get. The non-channel can be a little difficult to get early on, but I did actually get it when I was running my syndicate missions, when I was leveling up with Incinerate as well on the shifting stones, so you can get it on day one. There's a little bit of RNG to it as well. But yeah, basically just try and get a ring that maxes out your chaos resist as early as you can. And if you know, all points point to it, go on the market, pick one up for 10C. Like, this is obviously at the end of day one, so you know, at that stage, if you're mapping for a bit and progressing, you're constantly shifting gear up, and so you should be also constantly generating a little bit of chaos. And if you're doing early delving and stuff like that, you definitely will be generating chaos. Same with the bone ring as well, exactly the same scenario. Just hope to God you get the syndicate roll. If you don't stress. You know, worst case scenario, you got to talk to a friend or somebody else who has that role and they could do it for you, or you can just wait until some pop up on the market after the first day and then just drop the auras down, so lose flesh and stone for the first day and then run a mana flask as well. Same with the Stygian Vise. This isn't like a great Stygian Vise, like it's got chaos res on it, you know, that's basically it. You could Alteration Orb this, or you could use Abyss Fossils as well to get this on day one, so not hard to get. Same with Murdericide. This is just going to drop natively as you do Abyss missions and maps. Flasking, I'm not going to talk about flasking. There's nothing impressive here. Like, this is all just like day one flasking, so it's not crazy. Now, your large clusters, like, I wouldn't expect you to get these large clusters, like, if you're really playing a heavy run on the first day, yeah, you're going to get these large clusters, but if you don't freak out. You can get the build working perfectly fine without large cluster gems. These are just in here as an example of what to try and target on day one. Generally with melee large clusters too, they tend to be a bit cheaper. So you may find these are dirt cheap at the start of league because, you know, not a lot of people play melee outside of Bone Shatter. So they're probably not going to be overtly expensive. Though I haven't checked and I could be talking out my butt. But, you know, we're going to hope that they're relatively affordable. Beyond this, we've got Viridian Jewels in here, like literally just axe attack speed and axe damage and global accuracy. Nothing crazy here, but it does increase the damage significantly. Natural Affinity, you're going to want to get this as soon as you can, because it means that once you get Unstoppable, you can stand still and just dish out more damage, and you can take a lot more damage. Now, avoiding all the rest of the jewels, which are pretty straightforward stuff here, and we've got another large cluster in here as well. We do have Glorious Vanity with Zabiqua, which generally tends to be really cheap, and there'll be some crazy guys that'll be playing whatever builds to, you know, with Kinetic Blast or whatever in the first day to try and do 5-ways, so it's very likely this will come up in the first day, if not by the second day. And what this allows you to get is Divine Flesh, which then synergizes with the Fourth Vow, and then basically you take a lot less chaos damage overall, which is pretty significant as a damage reduction tool. So you get a 110,000 effective hit pool from this, so that's a pretty biggie when it comes down to it as well. Anyway, that's it for the gearing setup. Like, there is some stuff that looks like there's a bit of uphill, but like, this is target progression, right? So we go from getting out of maps, we've got to have a place to go. This is where we're going to go in that first day. You know, and don't stress if you don't get there in the first day. It's going to be sometimes a little slower, you know, depending on the build you want to play. Bone Shatter is not necessarily the fastest progression build in the first day, but, you know, if you put the time in and understand the build, it's going to work for you. So, yeah, you might see other people, like if you want a quick build that you're just going to run straight to endgame bosses with and then just use poison stacks, then go play Blade Vortex, you know, Pathfinder or something like that with poison stacking or something. This build's a little different because we're going to take this down into Delve. But if you just want to play like a steady build that's super tanky, that's melee based or whatever, this is going to be the build for you. So yeah, let's talk about the tree next. So as you can see with this tree, like, there's nothing crazy about this. So I've tuned this to level 90 as well, assuming that you get to level 90 in the first 2 days or 1 day. Basically, all the rest of the points after the campaign go into your cluster jewels here and in Nature's Presence. We did pick up Intelligence here, and we do pick up, you know, the Armor Mastery here, another couple points here, and also Cleaving, which you pretty much get straight out as you continue to level up. Depending on whether or not you're feeling tanky or not after you get out of the campaign, that can be one that you take, or if you're dying a lot, then you need to focus on pushing up your health where possible. We do lose the Born to Fight, which we'll get back in once we get it, you know, another couple levels up. But yeah, that's basically it for the tree. Nothing crazy. And as we can see, same setup. So you're going to go untiring first, undeniable second, unbreakable third, and unstoppable fourth. And that's basically it for the I guess day one POB, day one 5-link POB. There's nothing crazy in this build. And the usual question everyone asks me, so don't check it, but you're going to take Soul of Lunaris and Soul of Tukahama, and the reason being is Tukahama gives you increased regeneration while you're stationary, and so that's set to time spent 5, but we'll talk about the configuration next in this tree. Okay, so configuration wise, so you know we kill all bandits. We take Lunaris and Tukahama as our major and minor gods. We have time spent stationary as 5, and that's going to synergize with our nature's presence, patience. Sorry, and then basically frenzy charges comes from Blood Rage. Endurance charges comes from Inexorable on the tree. Life tap you've just got going on throughout the everything, but it doesn't affect your DPS. Onslaught comes from Tanuahi. Fortified, there's a fortified gem in your 6-link or your 5-link setup. Adrenaline comes from your Tanuahi gloves. Rage comes from your Axe Mastery node that generates 1 rage, at a set pacing. You do leech throughout, and that does affect your damage slightly. You do have Flask active, so that's a given. Consecrated Ground doesn't affect us, and we don't have it ticked anyway. Have you killed recently? Yeah, you probably killed recently, but it doesn't affect us. Have you been hit recently? Yes, most likely, and that actually makes you a little tankier because this build likes to get smacked. Now, if you're in melee distance to the enemy as 1, which most of the time with Bone Shatter, that's going to be the case, that's going to synergize with your close combat node or close combat skill gem. So yeah, that's the case. And main, we do have that on our totems, but it doesn't really do anything. Now, trauma stacks, I've actually capped this at 8 trauma stacks. So if you take this off, right, it'll say like 1.5 million DPS. And this is the thing that people don't tell you with POBs with Bone Shatter. So they'll say, I've got 20 million or 50 million DPS. Yes, assuming that you get to maximum trauma and assuming that you can sustain maximum trauma. That's generally not the case. So, unless you got like a crazy expensive build. So anyway, yeah, trauma stacks are set to 8. So, if you don't like that, whatever. 8's pretty consistent on a 2H build. Like, it doesn't have ashes or anything like that, so it's achievable. If it's not at 8, then you just set it to 5. Like, still does good damage. So yeah, that's basically where that's at. We do have Blood Stance. I generally tend to stay in Blood Stance because I'm lazy and I never remember to turn off and on Sand and Blood Stance. But yeah, you can change it to Sand Stance. It just makes you more survivable because inbound damage just has less of a chance of hitting you with projectiles. So there's nothing else ticked here either. Nothing else changed in here. And it's on Pinnacle Guardian damage. So it's pretty good damage, like $783,000 theoretically by the end of the first day. If you've got all the gearing set up and everything, and this is all fully explained here, is pretty damn consistent. But yeah, anyway, I think we'll leave it at that for explaining like a day 1 iteration. And I will put a POB in the description for like a day 2 6-link setup if you do happen to get a 6-link 4th bow on the first day, but I'm not going to assume that you will. Because the damage goes way up, which is pretty cool. Okay, so I hope this build sort of leveling guide for Bone Shatter has been really helpful. I've never done a leveling guide for Bone Shatter in the past, so I thought I'd do it justice since, I play a lot of Delve, and I think we all know me as the Delve guy these days. So I thought I'd do a video that sort of breaks it down. Now, I will credit, there's some stuff here from Mario as well, and his endgame POBs are down below. And there's also another POB which I pulled from another AEG character or player as the endgame POB. And obviously there's some input here from some guys in chat, definitely on the Bone Dome channel on the Discord as well. So check all those resources out, they're all really useful. But yeah, anyway, if you like this video, if you want to see more League Starter guides like this, like I'm probably not going to do this level of depth on many other builds that, maybe 2 per every League start, then yeah, let me know in the description below. If you've got, oh, there we go. If you've got any other feedback that you want to put it in the comments. I always invite discourse in the comments, but keep it clean as usual. But yeah, I'll be releasing some League Start stuff on Delve as per normal. Obviously there's the curation video coming, so I've already started planning that for anyone who wanted to know. Obviously waiting on patch notes, and that's another note I'll make here, that With this video, make sure you bear in mind that there will be adjustments, or most likely, hopefully, adjustments from the patch notes, depending on whether they attack the metas or not. We don't know if they're going to touch Bone Shatter at this stage, so, you know, do your build testing, have a go at it. Fingers crossed they don't touch Bone Shatter, but what we might find is even if they do, it won't significantly affect the build, because it is the only melee skill that scales properly in the game at this stage. Anyway, wink wink, come on, let's get some melee changes going, guys. Anyway, if you like the video, don't forget to like and sub. Don't forget to follow the Twitch. I've been streaming predominantly over there these days for live streams, but I'll try and do some co-streams on YouTube and Twitch moving forwards as well, because we're allowed to do that again. But beyond that, check out the Discord. We've got pinned comments from Mario, who made it, I think, in the 3rd or the 4th lowest Delver. And when I say lowest, like low depth Delver in last league as well, or 3.22. So he's put a lot of input into the channel and done a lot of work in there too. But yeah, anyway, until next time, don't forget to stay filthy, and I'll see you guys later.